Luke chapter 20, we'll begin this morning with verse 9. Luke chapter 20, verse 9. We spent our last Sunday morning talking about get my head together here in a minute. The chief priests, scribes, and the elders came to Jesus asking him what authority he was doing there. Who gave him the authority to be there in the temple there, teaching and doing what he was doing? And of course, they asked him the question, well, tell me, where did John the Baptist get his authority? And there was some discussion back and forth with that, and the conclusion was there in verse 8, Jesus was not going to tell them what authority he had, because those folks weren't being honest. They weren't able to, or weren't honest enough to answer the question about where John the Baptist got his authority. Was it from heaven or from men? And they, of course, knew the answer. A lot of people thought of John the Baptist as being a great prophet. They liked John the Baptist, and they couldn't afford to say that it was just from himself, something that he made up. They knew where it was from, but they refused to say it was from. And so the bottom line that I got from that was Jesus was not going to engage himself in a conversation with people who just weren't going to be honest. And of course, that applies for us today. If you know you're talking to someone who's not going to be honest about the conversation, you're wasting your time. You're just wasting your time. And I think that's what Jesus had in mind when he said, I'm just not going to talk to you about any of that. We'll see you later. Well, let's notice verse Luke chapter 20, verse 9. We'll read down through verse 16. Another parable. Luke chapter 20, verse 9. Began Jesus to speak to the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard and led it forth to husbandman and went into a far country for a long time. And at the season he sent a servant to the husbandman that they should give him of the fruit of the vineyard. But the husbandman beat him and sent him away empty. And again he sent another servant, and they beat him also, and they treated him shamefully and sent him away empty. And again he sent a third, and they wounded him also and cast him out. Then said the Lord of the vineyard, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. It may be that they will reverence him when they see him. When the husbandmen saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. What therefore shall the Lord of the vineyard do unto these folk? He shall come and destroy these husbandmen, and shall give the vineyard to others. When they heard it, that they said, God forbid. Notice verse 19, though, now. Let's include that. These chief priests and scribes, possibly the same ones that were listed there, described there in verse 1 of Luke chapter 20. Verse 19, the chief priests and the scribes the same hour sought to lay their hands on Jesus, but they feared the people. But notice this, because they perceive that he has spoken this parable against them. They're thinking I think he's talking about us, God. Really?
Ain't sure, but maybe.
It may be that they perceived it, they sort of think that. These chief priests and these scribes, they were supposed to know the old law. They're the ones who had the knowledge of the old law. The old law, they didn't. All the common people didn't have a copy of it like we have the Bible today. The people depended on the scribes and the chief priests to teach them out of the old law. There's a difference between the old law and the prophets. They were supposed to know the old law, but I would think that they would also know something about the prophecy in the old law, in the Old Testament. And we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 5 here in just a minute. But these folks are thinking, I think he's talking about us. I got the funny feeling he's talking about us here in that parable. Jesus was from Nazareth. How much of a formal education do you think Jesus had? Not much. Remember, was it Nathaniel that said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, he's from Nazareth. Jesus had some schooling in the old law. Remember, he went to the temple when he was, 12 years old or 13? I done forgot. But anyway, he was there asking questions of the priest. He knew something about it. But I'm sure that a lot of his knowledge was divinely inspired. I'm sure of that. But shouldn't these chief priests and the scribes know something about the prophets also? You know, in Acts chapter 4, verse 13, Peter and John there, remember they were from Capernaum. They were from Galilee also. And these chief priests noticed that they were unlearned and ignorant. They were fishermen, and here they're teaching this stuff. They're unlearned and ignorant. That's what they thought about Jesus too. But you know, I think he's talking about us in that in that parable there. Notice Isaiah chapter 5. Should these educated folks, shouldn't they have known what the prophet Isaiah had taught in Isaiah chapter 5? We're going to spend a good deal of time now in Isaiah. We'll get back to Luke chapter 20 here in a little bit. But shouldn't these learned folks, these educated folks, this is very similar to what we just read in Luke chapter 20. And at the conclusion of this reading, it's going to say, this prophecy is about the nation of Israel. I mean, this is about Israel. And those people are wondering, you know, I think maybe he's talking about me. I'm not sure about that, but I think he's talking about me. Isaiah chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Isaiah prophesied, now will I sing to my well-beloved, a song of my beloved, touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. And he fenced it in. He's going to build a vineyard now, a very fruitful hill now, but a good place. He fenced it in. He gathered the stones out thereof. He planted it with the choicest vine, built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes, sour wild grapes. You know, he went to a lot of trouble to plant this vineyard now. Verse 3, and now, O inhabitants of Israel, and you men of Judah, judge. Now, notice, I want to ask you between me and my vineyard. Look at me and what I've done with this vineyard. Y'all tell me something here. Verse 4, what could I have done more to my vineyard that I didn't do? Look at my effort. Look at what I did. Look at what I'm got out of it. What more could I have done? You know, when I looked at the vineyard that it should bring forth grapes, it produced wild grapes. I don't understand. Y'all tell me what I did something wrong. Obviously, in everything that I do to do. Verse 5, you know, look here, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with this vineyard. I'm going to take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and I'm going to break down the wall thereof, and it's going to be trodden down. I'm going to lay it waste. It shall not be pruned. It won't be digged around. There shall come up briars and thorns. And I will also command the clouds that they rain no more upon this vineyard. Notice verse 7 now. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. Those folks didn't know anything about that. I think he's talking about me, Kyle. I just get the feeling. This vineyard is the host of the host, is the house of Israel. The men of Judah was those pleasant plants. And this guy that planted it, he was looking for judgment, but he got oppression. He's looking for righteousness, but he got a cry from the people there. Shouldn't these people have known about this prophecy? I mean, pretty plain. He's talking about the nation of Israel. And of course, what I want us to do this morning is we want to make this application to us today. Are we in the vineyard of the Lord today?
Yes.
Yeah, we sing a song about that, don't we? We've been placed in a vineyard. How much effort have I made to produce this vineyard that I've been placed in now? You know, notice what he says there. He's got a fruitful hill here. The choicest spot that he could find. This well-beloved, of course, is God's Son. The well-beloved who's planted the vineyard, he's taken a fruitful hill, talking about the nation of Israel there, this much blessed nation of Israel. He's planted a physical vineyard, but of course this has got a spiritual connotation to it. He's fenced in the spiritual vineyard there to protect it. remove the stones. You know, there's stones out there in the middle of this thing. You know, he's going to remove those stones, and when the Lord brought the nation of Israel across the Jordan River there to occupy the land of Canaan, they had to drive out the foreigners that lived there. Well, that's still going on today over there. But he removed the stones. He planted the choicest vine that he could find. Went to the feed store and got the best stuff that he could find to plant there. You know, he blessed the nation of Israel with the best stuff that he could find. He gave them a pure religion that they could live by if they wanted to. He built a tower in the vineyard. That maybe symbolizes the temple in Jerusalem. You know, that he's placed there for them to worship for. He set up a wine press. This is where they're going to bring those good grapes. Or bring the good grapes, you know, to the wine press. That could be the altar where these folks were to bring their sacrifices yearly and offer those sacrifices there. But he expected this good, great vineyard that he set up and he's built for these folks to produce some good grapes. And it's producing wild grapes. You know, he's done everything for these folks. He's given them the opportunity. He gave them the ability to produce it, and yet they're not producing what they need to produce. Now, could that be us today? Could that be me today? You know, I'm going to apply it to me. Absolutely. As we go through this. Andy, go ahead.
It could apply to any of us.
Sir?
It could apply to any of us.
Sure. And I hope that we'll all apply this to each other, ourselves individually. Let me look at me. I don't need to look at Andy. Andy can look at Andy. Let me look at me. I know myself better than I know Andy. But you know, he's expecting them to do something. He did everything for them. He's given them the opportunity that they can produce if they want to. Everything prepared for them. Expected good fruit from those who's going to enjoy this great vineyard. And yet they produce wild grapes. How did they do that? You know, and he's asking those people down in the verse 4 there, the people of Judah, verse 3 rather, inhabitants of Jerusalem and folks of Judea, look at what I've done here, if you will please, and at me and my vineyard, verse 4, what more could I have done? Look at me and my vineyard, look at me and my effort here, what else could I have done? Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, these wild grapes, they can be the influence of the pagan nations and the influence of the heathens upon the house of Israel. So they go out and the wild grapes is that evil influence that affects all of us.
Yes. Yes.
Compromise of the world, in other words.
Yes. Those are influences. Yeah. He's placed us in a vineyard.
And we cross-pollinate, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you don't plant sweet corn and field corn in the same field because the sweet corn goes across and messes up the other corn.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And I think, you know, that's kind of the vineyard. We may not be the grapes. Instead of good grapes, we get muscadines because of the stuff that's around us.
Because of the things that are around us. We bring in other things. You know, judgment between me and what I've done here, you know, Judah, what would you do? What could I have done? What would you do if you were me? I obviously did something wrong. Give them everything. Everything. And of course, that applies to us today. You know, it planted the choicest vines, and he was expecting good grapes out of it, but, you know, they didn't produce good grapes. And, you know, if you notice there's no answer to the question he's asking them. You know, tell me what I could have done. In verse 5, he begins to tell them what he's going to do with this vineyard. But notice, if you would, let's turn over back up to Proverbs chapter 24. You know, the Lord blesses us with a lot in this life, physically and spiritually. Sometimes we abuse what we've been given physically. We don't take care of it. Sometimes we abuse what we've been given spiritually. We just don't realize sometimes what the Lord has done for us, and we just don't respect it. We don't take care of it for whatever reason. Proverbs chapter 24, notice verse 30. This is another vineyard. Proverbs 24 verse 30. I went by the field of a slothful, lazy person, by the vineyard of a person, of a man who is void of understanding. How did he know that? I mean, he's just walking down the road. And he's passing this vineyard here, and that belonged to a lazy man.
You know a tree by its fruit.
Sir?
I said you'll know a tree by its fruit.
Okay, well, that's good, yeah. Yeah. You're going to know
You know, he could see the neglect of the vineyard. And he would know the man didn't know how to prune vines. He could see the lack of growth and the lack of color leaves. The man didn't know how to fertilize.
Well, he probably knew.
But he didn't need to.
He didn't do it.
It says in verse 30, I went by the field of the slothful, the careless, the
Careless, lazy, just
lazy.
yeah. I think he's void of understanding. I think that to mean that he don't realize what he has. You wonder if this person worked for it. You ever seen people in life, and we all have. Somebody inherited something, and it didn't cost them nothing, and they didn't take care of it. They didn't take care of it. So I didn't have to work for it, and it didn't cost me nothing. Do we realize what we've been given? This is an opportunity here for you to build on it. It didn't cost me nothing, so I'll worry about it. Somebody else will come along later and give me something else, won't they? Probably not. Probably not. But notice here, Proverbs 24, verse 31, he's looking at this vineyard and he's figured out this is a lazy guy. It was all grown over with thorns. Nettles had covered the face of it, and the stone wall, the fence around it had failed down. You think? It looked like it used to be a vineyard. This belongs to somebody. And he figured out real quick, this belongs to somebody real lazy. He didn't realize what he had. Too lazy to do anything with what he had. And we're going to apply this to a physical sense. We can apply this to our spiritual sense today. Do we realize what we have? Do we take care of? Do we value what we've been given? This didn't cost me anything. Jesus paid for it all. It ain't cost me a dime. Do I need to take care of it? My part of it? Yeah, I sort of need to do that. Notice verse 32. Then I saw and considered it well. I'm standing here looking at it. I looked upon it, and I figured something out about this Edgar, about this person. I don't even know who he is. But I can tell by the condition of this property here, he didn't value what he had. Maybe he bought it. He didn't do anything with it. We had some neighbors, still got some neighbors. This past spring, they planted a little garden. Remember that down there behind their house? Maybe they didn't know. They planted Edgar, and the corn got up about that high. And a little bit, the weeds were about this high. And the corn never got much above that. I mean, they never came back and worked on it. Maybe there were circumstances because they couldn't. I don't know. But they didn't work on it. I mean, they planted it. There it is, but it didn't produce anything. But maybe they had reasons for all that. I don't know. But this person here, he's looking at this overgrown vineyard. He's figured something out. Notice about this person that owns it. A little more sleep. Just, let's a little more slumber, a little folded into the hands to sleep. I'm just tired, sort of tired. We're going to get to that tomorrow. That could be physically and that could be spiritually. Just a little more sleep. We have a Bible class here on Sunday mornings. And would it be a big sacrifice if people had to get up an hour earlier just to make the assembly to the Bible class? We're talking about an hour now, one hour to make it. I don't know. That'd be a big sacrifice. We better look at what we're doing here now. But this person who owns this vineyard, he's got to rest. He's rested a lot. Sound like, notice, verse 3 to 4, that man's poverty is going to come as one that traveleth, and his want is going to be like an armed person, a hobo that travels around who has no responsibility, has nothing. His poverty is going to be just like a hobo that travels around. He ain't got nothing, don't want nothing. And his need, his want is going to be like an armed person. He's going to be desperate sometimes to try to get something. He had something, but he didn't take care of it. And of course, that could be applied to the spiritual sense today. We have something today that didn't cost me a dime. How much am I willing to invest in it to try to make it better, to produce some good grapes? And of course, I need to look at me. But notice as we go back to Isaiah chapter 5. Anyone have any comment? I'm doing all the talking. Isaiah chapter 5. There's not going to be any more vineyard. We've let it fall apart like the guy did in Proverbs chapter 24. My physical vineyard, I've let it fall apart. My spiritual vineyard, I've let it fall apart. I didn't pay it any attention physically or spiritually. It was all given to me. It's going to be a privilege to be part of that vineyard and to have that vineyard, but those who didn't take care of it, they're not going to have it anymore. So they didn't take care of it. They're not going to produce anything but wild grapes, so they're not going to have anything. The workers in the vineyard didn't take care of it as they should. They didn't build it, and they didn't work for it, and so it didn't bother them in the least what happened to the thing until they didn't have it anymore. Notice verse 6. I'm going to lay it to waste. Remember when Jerusalem was going to be destroyed in the temple, back in Luke chapter verse 19? No stone will be left one upon another. I'm going to lay this vineyard to waste. Just like the vineyard in Proverbs 24. It was neglected. It was just, it was gone. It's not going to be pruned. It's not going to be holed around. It's not going to be fertilized. There's not going to be any rain on it anymore. Completely abandoned and dead. And of course, verse 7, the vineyard of the Lord of hosts, that vineyard is the house of Israel. And of course, that could be us today. Those choicest vines that were bought and placed in the vineyard were the people of Judah. He placed them in that great vineyard. Remember what Adam and Eve, they were placed in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Colossians chapter 1 and verse 13 tells us that we've been translated from We've been translated from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. Translated means what? Remember, Enoch was translated in Hebrews 11 to verse 4, sir. Transplanted. Moved from one spot to another. That's what a transplantation is, transplanted is. We've been moved from one spot to another, from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. We've been placed there too. Just like the nation of Israel in this vineyard, just like Adam and Eve was placed in the Garden of Eden, you and I have been translated into the kingdom of God's dear Son, which we sometimes refer to as being the vineyard. So what am I doing with the vineyard now? About me specifically. Now, notice if you're still in Isaiah chapter 5, go jump down to verse 11 and 12. Sometimes we get busy with our lives. I've got other things to do. Just busy. And, the vineyard's there. But am I neglecting it? Is the fence falling down? Verse 11. Woe to them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink that continue until night, till wine inflame them. These are people just enjoying life. It don't have to be a bunch of wino, just whatever we're doing that consumes our time that we want to do for ourselves. Notice verse 12. The harp and the viol and the tabret, the pipe and the wine, they're all in their feast. But notice this, the problem with they are so busy, they regard not the work of the Lord, and they don't consider the operation of his hands. He built this great vineyard on this choice field and planted the choicest vines. And they didn't regard that. what the Lord's done for them, didn't regard the operation of his hands, what he had done to place them in this vineyard. And I sometimes wonder today, is that me? Is that me? You know, and I do struggle with the idea, do I really appreciate what the Lord's done for me? I think that I do. I think I do. But do I really appreciate that? As I should, that he sent his only son to die for me on the cross. I know that. I hope if I don't appreciate it now, I will before he calls me home. I hope that I could reach that point. But I hope that I do appreciate it in the way that I should. But sometimes being human, we acknowledge it, we know that, but do we really, am I so busy with life that I don't regard what the Lord has done for me? Do I don't really regard what the Lord has done for me? Notice what he expected from these choice plants here in verse, where am I? Go back to Isaiah chapter 5. Verse 7. What he looked for was not grapes, of course. Now we're getting into the spiritual side of it. He looked for it for judgment. But he got oppression. And he looked for righteousness out of this vineyard. He's looking for judgment, and that don't mean punishment. Maybe the better word is justice. He looked for simply justice out of people, simply doing what is right, simply or trying to do what should be right. You know, in our Wednesday night class, at the conclusion of it last Wednesday night, we were talking about Jonah. And the Lord told Jonah, you know, Jonah, we can't destroy all those people because they don't know their right hand from their left. They understood it, that they needed to repent, and they did. But they needed a whole lot more instruction. They didn't know their right hand from their left. You know, and that's sort of like us today. Sometimes we know. But am I actually going to do we actually know our right hand from our left, or we just neglected and ignored? We simply doing what's right. Just do justice. Have respect for other people. Have respect for what the Lord has done for us. You know, they had no regard. Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 12, no regard for the Lord and what he had done. None, zero. I don't want to be in that group. I shouldn't be in that group. I need to look at myself. He sent his only son for us. And sometimes we have the attitude that, well, he sent his only son. That was in the past. You know, what's he going to do for me now? He's done all he's going to do. He planted them a vineyard. They had no regard for it. He's placed us in the vineyard. I need to have some regard for what he's done for me today. But what does the Lord expect of us today? Notice Micah chapter 6. He wanted justice, judgment. He wanted righteousness from those folks. Micah chapter 6. We're going to get back to Luke chapter 20 here in a little bit. Micah chapter 6. Where am I now? Here I am. Verse 2. Micah chapter 6, verse 2. Hear ye, O mountains, the Lord's controversy. You know, the Lord has something to say. I forgot the other meaning of that word. He's got an argument. He's got a contention. You strong foundation of the earth, listen up, for the Lord has some contention with his people, and he's going to plead. He's going to plead his case against Israel. Notice verse 3. Oh, my people, what have I done to you? What's the Lord done to us? If you expect me to get up an hour early on Sunday morning, you got another thing coming. That's a little bit too much there. What have I done to you? And wherein have I wearied you? Tell me. Well, you know, tell me what I've done and how I've mistreated you. First of all, you know, I brought you up out of the land of Egypt, redeemed you out of the house of servants. I sent before you Moses and Aaron and Miriam. Notice verse 6. Here's my attitude. Shall I come before the Lord and I'm going to bow myself before the high God And I'm going to come before him with burnt offerings and with calves of a year old. Verse 7, the Lord will be pleased with the thousands of rams that I can offer, and with the thousands of rivers of oil that I can offer. I can give you my firstborn son for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul. Is that what the Lord wants? I really couldn't do that, actually. Anybody want to offer their firstborn son? No. Thankfully, the Lord don't want that. Notice verse 8. Ricky, he showed you what's good. And he showed you what the Lord requires of you. Here's what he wants. Do justly. Love mercy. Walk humbly with the Lord. That's simple enough. Thankfully, we don't have to offer a firstborn son. We don't have to offer a bunch of rams and the rivers of oil. It's very simple. Just justice and behave justly. Treat people rightly and respect the Lord. To love mercy. Willing to forgive and quick to forgive. James chapter 2 and verse 13, Andy, I think it is. There's going to be judgment without mercy to those who have shown no mercy in this life. When I stand before the judgment seat of Christ, I don't want justice. I want mercy. If I'm not going to show mercy in this life, I ain't going to get no mercy when I stand before the judgment seat of Christ. We need to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with God. Behaving justly and showing mercy is going to bring about an humble walk with or life with the Lord. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 5. Or Hebrews chapter 11, Enoch and Noah both walked with God. And Hebrews 11 and verse 5 said that Enoch had a testimony of God that he pleased God. And he was translated. He was taken from one place to another place. And so we need to humble ourselves. We need to look at ourselves. How do I respect or regard what the Lord's done for me in this vineyard? Do I respect it? And am I trying to produce the type of fruit that he wants me to produce? Realize how the Lord has actually blessed me? Bernard, you ain't said a word. You ain't said nothing yet. I don't want to do all the talking. But anyway, realize how the Lord's blessed me. All the sacrifices of the rams and the rivers of oil and all that stuff, that could be hypocritical once I accomplish it. If I could accomplish it, I could still be a hypocrite. But now let's go back then.
Was you talking to me?
Yeah, I thought you wasn't hearing me.
Yeah, it went off on me. Go ahead.
Okay. I was afraid you weren't hearing me. So now if you would, let's go back to Luke chapter 20. That was the introduction for our class. Let's look at the parable now. Luke chapter 20. This is very similar to what we just talked about in Isaiah chapter 5 now. Luke chapter 20, he tells us there, a certain man planted a vineyard. And he led it forth to husband and went to a far country for a long time. A man has planted a vineyard. Now, who's the man? God. God's planted a vineyard for us. And he's going to rent it out to some folks that are called husbandmen. What is a husbandman?
One who takes care of a vineyard on behalf of the landowner, but not as an owner.
Okay, he's a tenant farmer. Something like that, yeah. He's not the owner. But this owner, a certain man planted a vineyard. He's sort of like the one back in Isaiah chapter 5. He planted a nice vineyard. It's all set up. You want to rent it from him? Because I got to go back to where I'm originally from. It's a long way to there, and I'm going to be gone a long time. So I need somebody dependable to put in this vineyard to make it to produce. And what we're going to do is how you're going to pay the lease or the rent on the thing is whatever you produce, I want a certain percentage of it, and the rest is yours. And that's a pretty good deal. That's an incentive to me to get out there and work in this vineyard, because it's going to be my livelihood. I can pay the rent to him out of what I produce there. So it's good for everybody around. He entrusted the cultivation and the care of this vineyard, the spiritual vineyard, to the priests and the scribes back at that time. They were the learned people. They were the educated people. They're the ones who were supposed to guide the people to take care of the vineyard. Priests and scribes. And apparently he trusted them. Everything should go very well. But notice verse 10, the time has come now that we need to pay some rent. In verse 10, and at the season he sent a servant to the husbandman. They should give him of the fruit of the vineyard, but the husbandman beat him and sent him away empty. Now who's the servant here?
Christ.
Well, not quite Christ. Prophets.
Yeah.
Prophets. It's time to collect the rent from what they produce now in the vineyard, the grapes there. So he's going to send a servant to collect the rent. He's the owner. Maybe he has other interests. Maybe he's too busy. Maybe it's too far. He can send a servant to collect the rent. These are good people. He trusted them with it. They're going to, they'll just give him the grapes and he'll be back here after a while. He went at the season. He went at the right time. He didn't go beforehand. Didn't go too late. They didn't have to pay the rent, the first month's rent and the last month's rent to move in there. No security deposit. He's working with them. He's trying to help them, put them on their feet. Here it is. But he sent this servant, and of course that is, as Kyle said, this is a prophet sent by God the Father. God sent these folks prophets who are tending to this vineyard from time to time. That's what Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 1 tells us. He sent prophets from time to time. They were there to guide the nation of Israel. They were there to guide these priests, these scribes that are taking care of the vineyard. These people, they were guiding, advising, reminding them of their duty as they tend to this vineyard. But in the physical sense, this servant that was sent, he was beaten. He's here to collect the rent now. We had a good harvest. Look at all of what we could have if we just, he's way off what we understand. Or he ain't coming. He ain't coming. For this little tad of the rent, he ain't coming. He sent the servant to collect the rent. They gave him a good beating, sent him away empty-handed. He's not the owner. The owner don't have time to come over here. What's he going to do to us? What can he do to us? The servant's been intimidated. He ain't coming back, and he's probably not going to send another servant, and he certainly ain't going to come himself because he's probably intimidated too. But of course, in the spiritual sense, these prophets were sent, and they were beaten also. Notice 2 Chronicles chapter 36. 2 Chronicles chapter 36. The Lord sent lots of prophets. Did they respect these prophets? They were sent from God himself. No, they were too busy doing whatever they did. Where did it go now? 2 Chronicles 36, verse 11 and 12. Zedekiah was 120 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did that which was evil of the sight of the Lord, his God, and he humbled not himself before Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah is the prophet. He ain't paying him no mind. That Jeremiah the prophet, who's speaking from the mouth of the Lord himself. He didn't pay him no mind. Notice verse 14. Moreover, in addition to that, what Zedekiah was doing or not doing, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen. They polluted the house of the Lord, the temple which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by messengers, raising up early and sending them because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. He loved these people. He put them in this vineyard. He prepared give them everything. They ain't paying him no mind. Verse 16, but they mocked the messengers of God. They despised God's word. They misused his prophets until the wrath of God arose against his people till there was no remedy. God had it up to here with them. He sent so many messengers and sent so many prophets, and he had done so much for these folks that he just, there was no remedy to what could be done, and no remedy to his wrath that he's going to take out on these people. Anyone have anything to say?
Yeah. You was talking about a while ago, Paul, I can't remember the chapter, I think it's 6 in Romans, where he talked about the vineyard and the grapevine. Is it that chapter? where Paul says that they'll be cut off in
Yeah, that's in Romans. Romans.
what chapter, what verse?
Oh, did you say Romans? I thought you said Acts. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Romans chapter 11.
You know, the Jews didn't take care of the vineyard like they should, so they're going to be cut off
Yeah.
out of the original vine, and new vines will be grafted in. He
Right.
talked about that, how they didn't take care of the vineyard like they should, and they're going to be cut off, and new things will be grafted in, new vines.
Right. Right. That's Romans chapter 11. Beginning in 11 and beginning about verse 17. Yeah, he's gonna prune this vine pretty good. He's gonna shut this vineyard down. They didn't want it, they didn't appreciate it, so let's just do away with the whole thing. You know, they didn't pay these prophets any attention. You know, he said the owner of the vineyard sent his servant. They didn't pay him no mind. They gave him a good whipping and sent him home empty-handed. But notice verse 11, he didn't give up on them. You know, maybe there's some misunderstanding. Verse 11, again, he sent another servant, and they beat him also and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe they thought that was a false servant, you know, an imposter that, you know, they wasn't going to give it to him. You know, but the second one, they treated him the same way. In fact, maybe they treated him worse than the first. They treated him shamefully. You know, he left empty-handed too. Notice Acts chapter 7. This is Stephen, right before he's stoned to death. Acts chapter 7. Notice what he asked these people, verse 52. Acts chapter 7, verse 52. Tell me something, which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted? All the prophets that the Lord sent, can you name one prophet that your ancestor didn't persecute? That's pretty bad accusation there. You know, that they've slain them which showed before the coming of the just one, this just one of whom you have now been the betrayers and murderers. So, you know, the prophets that sent prophesied of the coming of the just one, the Son of God. They killed him, and when he finally showed up, y'all killed him. Notice verse 53. You folks who have received the law by the disposition of angels, and you didn't keep it. Just completely disregarded it. Meant nothing to you. You have not kept it. You knew what was expected. We know what is expected today. But they didn't want to pay the rent. They didn't want to perform their duty. And so they keep sending service. Is the Lord patient with us today? Ooh, yeah. He's patient with me, Edgar. I don't know why, but he's patient with me, and I'm so thankful for that. He's still sending messengers today. And we need to regard, we need to pay that some attention, because he's placed us in a good vineyard also. We need to produce some good fruit for what he's done for us today. Anyone have any comment?
I'll just say, Ricky, back to verse 4 in chapter 5, it says, what more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? I mean, that was a rhetorical question.
Yes, yeah.
He wasn't supposing that there was some other thing he could do for his vineyard.
Yeah.
And although this is directed towards Israel and what God has done for them, you know, what God had been doing or was doing for them, I mean, I think as you spoke earlier, you know, well, maybe not earlier, but you have said, you know, a bunch, is that, you know, what we have today with the written word at our hand, you know, at our fingertips, in all forms, and, you know, the ability to know all that God expects of us and has done for us, you know, we will have far less of an excuse than even maybe they did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you had a bunch of people there who didn't have access to this, and
Right.
they were reliant on the Sadducees and the Pharisees.
Absolutely.
For God's word, you know, but we're not.
Yeah.
We have it. We know it. Can know it if we want,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to be held responsible for it regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's nothing else left to do for us. If what has been done for us is not enough for us to realize that that we've been given everything, then, you know, we're gonna be in trouble one day.
Absolutely we are. You know, Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 26, if we sin willfully, there remains no more sacrifice for my sin. I'm expecting something else to be done, actually. Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen.
Been done.
Yeah, no. He planted them a vineyard and put it in it. They didn't care about that. Done the same thing for us. And that's all he's gonna do. And I need to understand that. I need to respect it. And I need to appreciate it. Fully appreciate it. Fully understand it. I know it. But sometimes I wonder about myself, do I really appreciate it? I've enjoyed the class this morning. I appreciate your help. We'll start with verse 12 next Sunday, Andy, I think. So chapter 20, verse 12.